Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a couple of follow-up questions before I pass to Representative Sewell. It wasn't simply that the Russians had a negative preference against Secretary Clinton. They also had a positive preference for Donald Trump. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
And I want to ask you to say whether this is an accurate characterization of Mr. Trump. I won't put you in that spot. But would it be logical for the Kremlin to prefer a candidate that disparaged NATO to be President of the United States?
You're not going to put me in that spot, you said? I'm happy,
Yes.
I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that.
I'm not going to put you in the spot of answering whether this is an accurate characterization of Mr. Trump's views, but it would be logical for the Kremlin to want someone who had a dim view of NATO. Is that right?
All kidding aside, I don't think that's something I should be answering. I mean, that's beyond my responsibilities.
Well, what is the Russian view of NATO? Do they like NATO? Do they want to see NATO strong?
Well, again, I'm sure you have already spoken to people who are greater experts than I, but yeah, they don't like NATO. They think NATO encircles them and threatens them.
And would they have a preference for a candidate that expressed an openness to repealing the sanctions over Ukraine?
And I don't want to get into business of commenting on that. I know.
Well, then let me ask you this way, Director. Would they like to see the sanctions on Ukraine go away?
Yes.
Would they have a preference for a candidate who expressed open admiration for Putin?
And I hope you'll reformulate the question. Mr. Putin would like people who like him.
Would they have a preference for a candidate who encouraged Brexit and other departures from Europe? Would they like to see more Brexits?
Yes.
And have the Russians in Europe demonstrated a preference for business people as political leaders with the hope that they can entangle them in financial interests, or that they may allow their financial interests to take precedence over the interests of the countries in Europe they represent?
In our joint report, we recount that the Russians, that President Putin has expressed a preference for business leaders in leading other governments, and mentions Gerhard Schroeder and I'm going to forget one. Berlusconi, because he believes they're people that are more open to negotiation, easier to deal with.
At this point, let me yield to Representative Sewell.